Before we get started, take a second to like the video, subscribe to Classic Hollywood Daily, leave a comment, and hit the bell notification so you never miss a story from Hollywood's golden age. Now let's dive in. For more than 30 years, Johnny Carson welcomed America into his living room night after night. From behind the Tonight Show desk, he introduced viewers to thousands of stars from every corner of entertainment. But Carson wasn't just interviewing celebrities, he was quietly studying them. Those who worked closest to him often said Johnny noticed things most people missed. A longtime Tonight Show producer once revealed that Carson could read micro-expressions, pick up on the smallest shifts in body language, and sense when someone's presence filled a room before they ever spoke a word. And when it came to beautiful women, Johnny's observations were especially sharp. In his later years, after stepping away from the spotlight, Carson occasionally shared private reflections with a small circle of friends. One evening at his Malibu home, after a few glasses of his favorite high-end scotch loosened his usually guarded demeanor, Johnny surprised everyone in the room. He began naming the 8 most extraordinarily beautiful women who had ever appeared on The Tonight Show. It wasn't a list based on headlines or pin-up popularity. As one guest later explained, Johnny wasn't talking about looks alone. He talked about presence, that rare, indefinable quality that made the camera fall in love instantly, the kind of beauty that made a studio audience go quiet, the kind that could momentarily cause even Johnny Carson himself to lose his rhythm. Tonight, we're revealing Johnny Carson's personal list of the 8 most beautiful women ever to grace The Tonight Show. Not just for their physical beauty, but for the unique spark Carson noticed during their unforgettable moments on television's most prestigious stage. And we begin with the woman Johnny once described as having the kind of beauty that made time stand still. An actress whose entrance alone caused the legendary host to momentarily forget what he was supposed to say next.
Would you welcome Raquel Welch?
When Raquel Welch walked onto The Tonight Show stage for the first time in 1970, something rare happened. Johnny Carson, television's most controlled, most disciplined host, lost his composure, if only for a moment. For a man whose career was built on flawless timing and cool authority, those few seconds of visible hesitation said more than any compliment ever could. She appeared on the show several times over the years, and according to those who were there, the effect never faded. A longtime camera operator once recalled that the reaction in the studio was almost physical. You could feel it, he said. The moment she stepped out, the audience would inhale all at once, like the air had been pulled from the room. He worked camera 2, positioned to capture the guest entrance. And every time Raquel Welch was scheduled, the director would quietly say into his headset, "Take your time on this one. Nobody's going to complain." What made Welch unforgettable wasn't just her extraordinary beauty, though that was undeniable. It was the confidence with which she carried it. Unlike many actresses who soften their presence with self-deprecating humor or feigned modesty, Raquel Welch did the opposite. She moved with full awareness of her effect, and she never apologized for it. Carson once said off-camera, "She doesn't enter a room, she takes it over." A producer who worked closely with Johnny remembered that line well because it wasn't criticism, it was admiration. Johnny respected guests who understood their own power and knew how to use it. Raquel Welch knew exactly what she was doing every second she was on camera. Her timing, her posture, even the way she crossed and uncrossed her legs. One writer described it as watching a masterclass in how to own a television appearance. Nothing was rushed, nothing was wasted. This wasn't just about looking stunning. Welch had an instinctive understanding of television itself, how to create moments people would remember. Long before media coaching became an industry, she seemed to understand the camera as if it were an old friend. Her face, her figure, her pauses, her delivery, it was all working together. "She had it all," one Tonight Show writer said. "Most beautiful guests relied on looks alone. Raquel brought wit, stories, and just enough flirtation with Johnny to make the chemistry crackle." She understood something many never did. Beauty might get you invited once, but personality is what brings you back. Behind the scenes, her appearances caused what staff members jokingly called the Raquel effect. Perfectly professional crew members suddenly found very good reasons to linger on set during her segments. One stagehand laughed years later that Studio One somehow doubled its male population whenever her name appeared on the schedule. Raquel Welch didn't just appear on The Tonight Show, she claimed it, and everyone in the room knew it. Whenever Raquel Welch's name appeared on the booking sheet, the atmosphere inside NBC changed instantly. According to one crew member, men from departments that had absolutely nothing to do with the show would suddenly find urgent reasons to wander near Studio One. We'd have guys from accounting saying they needed to check something with production. The camera operator laughed. Engineers who normally stayed glued to their booths would develop mysterious equipment issues that somehow required their physical presence on the floor. Even NBC executives, people who almost never attended tapings, would materialize and quietly stand in the wings. Johnny noticed too. During one commercial break, he dryly remarked, if she ever signed up for the Army, there wouldn't be a single draft dodger left. It was classic Carson, funny, understated, and dead accurate. For all his legendary control, Raquel Welch posed a unique challenge to Johnny's composure. He was famous for keeping a slight emotional distance from even his most dazzling guests, but with her, that detachment occasionally cracked. There was one appearance, a producer vividly remembered, where Welch wore a red dress with a neckline that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Johnny began a question, stopped mid-sentence, glanced down at his blue card, looked back up, and finally said, "I'm sorry. What was I saying?" The studio erupted in laughter because everyone knew exactly what had happened. Johnny Carson almost never got flustered on air. So when it happened, and with Raquel, it happened more than once, it became both hilarious and strangely humanizing. Yet what Carson admired most about Welch wasn't just her looks. It was her intelligence and her self-awareness. Unlike many actresses who bristled at being known primarily for their beauty, Raquel had made peace with her image and learned how to use it strategically rather than fight it. Johnny once told me, Raquel knows exactly who she is and what she represents. Shared a talent coordinator who worked closely with him. She doesn't apologize for it. She doesn't pretend it's not real. And she doesn't resent it. That honesty, that's rare. Coming from Johnny Carson, a man who spent his life quietly studying people, that was high praise. That respect showed in the way he interviewed her. Carson didn't reduce Welch to compliments or easy questions. He asked about her career choices, her challenges, and her experiences navigating Hollywood as one of the first Latina leading ladies, though that aspect of her identity was rarely acknowledged at the time. Their conversations had real depth. As one writer observed, Johnny didn't just toss her softballs about her latest project. He engaged with her as someone with insight, perspective, and lived experience. That respect, combined with the unmistakable appreciation of her beauty, created interviews that were both thoughtful and electric, charged with an unspoken tension that made for unforgettable television. And as Raquel Welch's distinctly American glamour faded from the stage, Carson's couch soon welcomed a very different kind of presence. Next came European sophistication incarnate, the Italian screen legend whose mere entrance turned Studio One into what one staff member described as a masterclass in sensuality without saying a single word.
A.E. Hotchner called Sophia Living and Loving, and it's a great kick to welcome her tonight. Would you welcome Sophia Loren?
When Sophia Loren made her first appearance on The Tonight Show in 1979, the atmosphere inside Studio One changed instantly. She didn't arrive with typical Hollywood sparkle. She arrived with something far rarer, old-world elegance, sensuality, and a commanding presence that felt almost timeless. Her entrance alone said everything. Unhurried, confident, regal. This was not a guest rushing to please. This was a woman who knew exactly who she was. Johnny Carson, famous for treating every guest the same, whether an unknown comic or a global superstar, was visibly affected. Something shifted, recalled a director who worked that night. Johnny leaned forward more. He laughed just a beat too enthusiastically. He kept adjusting his tie. Those little tells? Anyone who knew him could see it immediately. Carson was flustered. Unlike many American screen beauties who projected warmth and approachability, Lauren brought a distinctly European gravity, a mature sensuality layered with intellect and life experience. It caught Carson slightly off guard. Her answers were thoughtful, sometimes playful, sometimes provocative, all delivered in that unmistakable Italian accent that transformed even the simplest sentence into something lyrical. "You don't interview Sophia Loren," a Tonight Show writer once joked. "You try to survive her." It wasn't criticism, it was admiration. She brought an intensity to the conversation that was impossible to ignore. When she spoke, her eyes locked onto Johnny's. More than once, crew members watched him visibly work to maintain his professional composure. There was a moment during one interview, a producer remembered, when Loren was describing a scene from one of her films. To emphasize her point, she gently placed her hand on Johnny's arm. "I honestly thought we might need to cut to commercial," the producer laughed, just to give him a second to recover. What made Sophia Loren such a compelling Tonight Show guest wasn't just the contrast between her smoldering screen image and her real-life presence. It was the depth beneath the beauty. Viewers tuning in expecting glamour encountered something else entirely. A woman who spoke thoughtfully about Italian neo-realist cinema, about art and identity, about growing up in war-torn Italy, and about the challenge of remaining authentic while working inside the Hollywood system. Yes, she was an Italian icon with legendary curves and undeniable confidence, one television critic wrote after her appearances. But that was only the beginning. Her intelligence, her perspective, and her lived experience gave those interviews a substance that lingered long after the applause faded. For Johnny Carson, a man who had seen it all, Sophia Loren wasn't just another beautiful guest. She was an experience. She wasn't just beautiful. She was captivating in a way that demanded attention without ever asking for it. Behind the scenes, Sophia Loren's appearances created a very different atmosphere from the barely contained chaos that followed some other glamorous guests. With Loren, the energy shifted into something quieter, almost reverent. "There was a hush," recalled one longtime crew member. "The place that was usually loud and joking suddenly went still." A production assistant who worked several of her visits remembered it clearly. "We treated her like royalty, not just because of how she looked, but because of what she represented." This was an international film legend, someone who'd worked with the greatest directors in cinema history. There was no backstage horseplay, no off-color jokes. When Sophia Loren was booked, everyone was on their best behavior. The respect was genuine, and it was unanimous. For Johnny Carson, Loren occupied a rare category of guest. Her cultural weight and artistic legacy demanded real engagement, and yet her extraordinary beauty created an undeniable undercurrent, one that never disappeared, but never overwhelmed the conversation either. That balance made their interviews hum with a unique energy. "Johnny had this wonderful mix of awe and admiration with her," said someone who worked closely with him. "He was clearly dazzled, who wouldn't be, but he also respected her deeply as an artist who built a remarkable career on her own terms. You could see it on camera." Carson would ask thoughtful questions about her work with De Sica or Fellini, leaning in with genuine curiosity, while occasionally appearing just a little distracted by the totality of her presence. It was charming precisely because it was real. What viewers at home may not have fully realized was how different Loren's Tonight Show appearances were compared to her interviews elsewhere in America. Too often, hosts focused almost exclusively on her status as a sex symbol. Carson didn't. He consistently engaged with her full identity as an artist, a mother, and a woman who rose from wartime poverty to international stardom. And Loren responded to that respect by giving him her best self. The conversations had real substance, a Tonight Show writer noted. She talked about her difficult childhood, the struggle to be taken seriously when you're both beautiful and talented, and the challenge of navigating between European and American film traditions. Yet none of it felt heavy. She spoke with warmth, intelligence, and just enough playful flirtation to keep the exchange lively. The result was an interview that felt both intimate and elevated, serious without ever losing its sparkle. As we move on from Loren's sophisticated European allure, we turn to a very different kind of beauty altogether. The all-American freshness that quite literally stopped the show the moment she sat down across from Johnny Carson's desk.
Thank you. Yes, and even when we're not busy, we don't go to New York. I mean, unless we absolutely have to.
Now, why?
Bo Derek, the woman who silenced the studio. When Bo Derek made her first appearance on The Tonight Show in late 1979, just weeks after 10 had turned her into an overnight sensation, something unusual happened in Studio One. The audience didn't erupt into applause. They went completely quiet. It wasn't awkward silence, it was awe. For a few long seconds, Johnny Carson simply waited, letting the moment pass before beginning the interview. Even he seemed aware that the usual rhythms of television had briefly been suspended. She became a phenomenon overnight, recalled a talent coordinator from that era. But even those of us who had seen the movie weren't prepared for the impact of seeing her in person. There's something different about beauty when it's right in front of you. The camera actually diminished her, which almost never happens. What made Derek's Tonight Show appearances especially memorable wasn't just how striking she looked, it was how natural she seemed. Unlike many sudden stars who arrived with polished anecdotes and carefully rehearsed charm, Derek came across as unaffected and sincere. Her beauty was obvious, but her apparent lack of self-consciousness about it was what truly caught Carson's attention. Johnny once called her a living statue, a longtime producer recalled. He said she threw him off his rhythm, not because of anything she said, but because there was such a contrast between how extraordinary she appeared and how ordinary, in the best sense, she was as a person. That contrast was quietly disarming, even for someone as experienced as Carson. The effect she had wasn't limited to Johnny. The entire studio felt it. Cameramen lingered on her longer than usual. NBC pages found excuses to stay near the stage. Even Doc Severinsen and the band, veterans who had seen countless celebrities, fell uncharacteristically silent. When she was talking, no one moved. A camera operator said with a laugh, "I'm not even sure they were breathing. You could hear the air conditioning. That's how quiet it got." Carson noticed too. During one commercial break, he turned to Ed McMahon and joked, "I could read the phone book right now and they'd think it was fascinating." Ed shot back, "They haven't taken their eyes off her long enough to notice you're still here." Behind the scenes, Derek stood out for another reason, her simplicity. At a time when many stars arrived with extensive lighting demands, strict camera angles, and tightly controlled talking points, she had none of it. She showed up alone, a producer recalled. No entourage, no requests, no agenda. Our pre-interview team was almost thrown off by how uncomplicated she was. In an industry built on image management and calculation, that kind of authenticity was rare, and Carson recognized it immediately. After her first appearance, Johnny quietly told a producer, "She has no idea how beautiful she is, and that makes her twice as beautiful." Coming from a man who had spent decades studying people and spotting artifice from a mile away, that was genuine praise. Derek spoke about her sudden fame with gratitude and mild disbelief, not strategy. When Carson asked her how it felt to be labeled a symbol of beauty almost overnight, her response was simple and unguarded. "It's very nice," she said, "but it's strange. I still feel exactly the same." Johnny smiled and replied, "The rest of us don't." The audience erupted, but what lingered was Carson's clear appreciation for her grounded nature. To a host who built his career on separating authenticity from performance, Bo Derek represented something increasingly rare in Hollywood, someone who wasn't trying to be anything more than herself, and didn't yet realize how remarkable that already was. Natural beauty matched by natural behavior. In private conversations, Johnny Carson often contrasted Bo Derek with other guests who arrived armed with carefully constructed personas and well-rehearsed stories. Over the years, he had seen how fame taught people to perform even when they weren't acting. Most beautiful actresses, Johnny once remarked, according to a longtime producer, learn how to be famous. They develop a public version of themselves to match their image, polished, calculated, and safely predictable. Bo, he felt, was different. Fame happened to her so fast, the producer explained, that she hadn't had time to build those layers yet. There was no armor, no performance. What the audience saw was simply who she was. Johnny found that deeply refreshing, especially in an industry where authenticity was becoming harder and harder to find. He admired the fact that she wasn't managing her image. She was living inside it, still surprised by it, still untouched by the machinery of celebrity. That sincerity lingered long after the cameras stopped rolling, leaving a stronger impression than any practiced charm ever could. And as we move from Bo Derek's fresh, all-American presence, we now turn to a very different kind of beauty, Hollywood royalty. A woman whose legend arrived before she did, and whose appearance on The Tonight Show became one of the most anticipated moments of Johnny Carson's career.
Well, I'm sure you were very cautious this last time.
That is true.
Booking Elizabeth Taylor on The Tonight Show was treated as a major television event, so significant in fact that NBC executives, who typically trusted Johnny Carson to run his program without interference, personally attended pre-production meetings to discuss how best to handle her appearance. By 1992, Elizabeth Taylor was widely regarded as one of the last true goddesses of Hollywood's golden age. She rarely granted television interviews, which made her visit to Carson's couch feel momentous before she ever set foot in the studio. When she arrived, the entire atmosphere changed, recalled a stage manager who worked that night. People who had worked with presidents, music legends, and the biggest stars in the world suddenly found themselves straightening their jackets and standing a little taller. Taylor didn't just bring celebrity with her, she brought history. Her violet eyes, legendary diamonds, and unmistakable presence seemed to overwhelm the set. There was a collective awareness among the staff that this wasn't just another famous guest. This was Elizabeth Taylor. Unlike most guests, who were escorted quietly to the green room by a page, Taylor's arrival involved ceremony. The head producer personally greeted her at the stage door, and Johnny Carson, who almost never met guests before taping, made a rare exception, stepping out to welcome her himself. Johnny later said she was Hollywood royalty, and she knew it, shared a producer who witnessed the moment. He didn't mean that critically, he respected it. There was no false modesty, no attempt to blend in. Elizabeth Taylor understood exactly who she was, one of the final icons of classic Hollywood. And she carried that identity with unapologetic grace. That confidence was immediately evident when she made her entrance. While younger celebrities often bounded onto the stage waving eagerly, Taylor moved at a measured pace. She acknowledged the standing ovation with a slight nod and a controlled smile, somehow gracious and imperial at the same time. Other guests walked on, a cameraman observed. She arrived. It was the difference between someone seeking the audience's approval and someone bestowing her presence upon them. Taylor didn't need validation. She already knew her place in history. That certainty, paired with her enduring beauty, even later in life, created an electric stillness in the studio. The audience didn't shift. The crew barely moved. The room simply waited. The interview itself became a study in star power. While most guests leaned forward, eager to connect with Carson and win the audience, Taylor remained poised and slightly distant. For perhaps one of the few times in his career, Johnny Carson, the most commanding interviewer in television, found himself working to draw a guest out. And in that subtle reversal of roles, the truth became unmistakable. Elizabeth Taylor didn't come to The Tonight Show to be introduced. She came as a living legend, and everyone in the room knew it. By 1976, Farrah Fawcett had become a cultural phenomenon. Her now iconic red swimsuit poster sold more than 12 million copies, making it the best-selling pinup of all time. That same year, shortly after Charlie's Angels premiered, she made her first appearance on The Tonight Show, and the reaction was unlike anything Johnny Carson had seen before. The applause went on so long that Carson actually motioned to his director to trim it for broadcast, a rare moment when enthusiasm exceeded even television's generous limits. People forget just how big she was, recalled an NBC page who worked the audience that night. When Farrah walked onto that stage, it felt like something historic. People were standing up just to get a better look. I had to ask them to stay in their seats. Unlike guests who projected elegance or dramatic intensity, Fawcett radiated warmth. There was a brightness to her presence, an easy joy, that immediately set her apart. Carson later identified that quality as her defining trait. "She brought happiness with her," said a talent coordinator. With someone like Elizabeth Taylor or Sophia Loren, the room went quiet out of respect. With Farrah, people smiled. Just seeing her made them happy. Johnny noticed it instantly. After her first appearance, he reportedly told a producer, "She's like human champagne. The whole room feels lighter when she's here." That energy carried directly into her interviews. Farrah didn't measure every response or guard her personality. She leaned forward, laughed easily, and spoke with open enthusiasm, sometimes so much that Carson had to adjust his usual rhythm. "If she came on every week, I'd forget how to talk," Carson once joked, according to a writer who prepared questions for her segments. The comment was affectionate. Her excitement was contagious, and Johnny often leaned back and let her carry the moment, knowing the audience was completely engaged. Behind the scenes, her appearances generated a noticeable buzz. The day Farrah was booked, the whole place felt different, the talent coordinator laughed. Guys who usually wore casual shirts suddenly showed up in jackets and ties. Everyone found a reason to be near the stage. Even Carson, known for his consistency, seemed to put in a little extra effort on those nights. What made Fawcett such a natural fit for The Tonight Show was her spontaneity. She was willing to play along, follow Carson into unscripted moments, and let the conversation unfold naturally. During one appearance, Johnny made a joking comment about her famous hair. Without hesitation, Farrah turned in her chair, handed him a brush, and said, "All right, show me how you do it." The audience lost it, remembered a cameraman. Johnny almost never did physical bits like that with guests, but there he was, brushing her hair as carefully as if it were glass. He looked genuinely nervous about messing it up. Farrah, meanwhile, laughed the entire time. It was the perfect example of what made her special. She wasn't just admired, she was enjoyed. And for Johnny Carson, who valued authenticity above all else, that made Farrah Fawcett unforgettable. It was completely unplanned and absolutely perfect television. That moment captured exactly what made Farrah Fawcett's appearances so special. Her willingness to be spontaneous extended naturally into her comfort with Johnny Carson's occasional flirtatious remarks. Rather than deflecting or freezing up, she responded with humor and ease, creating a light, playful chemistry that never felt forced or uncomfortable. Johnny might tease, "I don't know how your husband lets you out of his sight," and Farrah would fire right back with a smile, "Well, he knows I'm coming to see you, Johnny, so he figures I'm in good hands," recalled a Tonight Show writer. It was the perfect balance. Carson could acknowledge her extraordinary beauty without crossing a line, and Farrah could play along without it ever feeling demeaning. The result was a rapport that felt effortless, warm, and genuinely fun to watch. For Carson, who had interviewed more beautiful actresses than almost anyone in television history, Fawcett represented a distinctly American kind of appeal, one he found especially charming. In private conversations, he often contrasted her with the increasingly manufactured glamour that had begun to dominate Hollywood. Johnny once said Farrah was beautiful in a way that looked like good health, not just good genes, revealed someone close to the host. He meant she had this vibrant outdoor energy, sunshine, swimming pools, tennis courts. Her beauty felt alive, not constructed. After years of sitting across from guests whose images had been carefully engineered and tightly controlled, Carson found that natural brightness refreshing. Farah didn't seem to be performing beauty, she simply embodied it. As we leave behind Fawcett's California sunshine, we turn now to a very different kind of allure, the elegant sophistication of a groundbreaking actress whose beauty was matched by historic significance, and whose appearances on The Tonight Show carried both visual impact and cultural weight. When Diane Carroll walked onto The Tonight Show stage, she brought more than extraordinary beauty. She carried the quiet gravity of someone who had already made history, breaking barriers as the first Black woman to star in her own network television series in a non-stereotypical role with Julia in 1968. Carroll represented a rare and powerful combination: undeniable glamour paired with genuine cultural significance. It was a balance Johnny Carson recognized immediately and treated with unmistakable respect. "Stunning, elegant, and completely unshakable," observed a producer who worked on several of her appearances. Most guests showed at least a flicker of nervous energy when they sat down with Johnny. Diane never did. She seemed as if interviewing with the most powerful man in television was simply another part of her day. That self-possession, combined with her intelligence and articulate responses, created a presence that felt both warmly engaging and subtly regal. Carroll didn't lean into nervous charm or self-deprecation. She didn't need to. Her confidence was calm, assured, and effortless. Unlike many beautiful actresses who softened their intellect to appear more approachable, Carroll brought thoughtful sophistication into every conversation. She spoke candidly not only about her current work, but about the broader context of her career, what it meant to navigate an industry that had historically offered Black women so few meaningful opportunities. These were not heavy or confrontational discussions. They were measured, reflective, and grounded in lived experience. Carson listened closely, often allowing her the space to finish her thoughts without interruption, a subtle signal of how seriously he took her perspective. Johnny admired her deeply. "She walks in like she's floating," he once said, referring not just to her physical grace, but to the way she seemed untouched by the pressures that unsettled so many other guests. In Carroll's appearances, viewers saw a woman who had earned her place through talent, discipline, and resilience, and who carried that legacy with quiet dignity. She didn't command the room by demanding attention. She did it simply by being exactly who she was. A talent coordinator who booked several of her appearances later said that what impressed him most wasn't just Diane Carroll's beauty or polish, it was her command of substance. She could address difficult, meaningful subjects: racism in Hollywood, the responsibility she felt as a pioneering figure, the challenge of protecting artistic integrity, while still remaining effortlessly engaging. Johnny once told his producer, "She can make important points without ever sounding like she's lecturing," the coordinator recalled, "and that's a rare gift." Behind the scenes, Carroll's visits were marked by something different from the buzz that accompanied other glamorous guests. Instead of excitement, she inspired what one crew member described as professional admiration at the highest level, a collective recognition that they were in the presence of someone whose talent carried real historical weight. "Beauty with power behind it," noted a stage manager who worked several of her segments. "You could feel it the moment she arrived." Backstage chatter faded. Pages straightened up. Producers lowered their voices. The usual joking and casual banter disappeared when Diane Carroll was booked. It wasn't simply about how she looked, though she was undeniably beautiful. It was about who she was and what she represented. What made Carroll particularly effective as a Tonight Show guest was her ability to blend glamorous appeal with meaningful conversation. She could move effortlessly from discussing fashion or theater to speaking candidly about civil rights and representation in Hollywood, never sounding rehearsed, never forcing the shift. One writer remembered a moment when Johnny asked her about a recent role. Instead of answering directly, Carol gently but firmly redirected the conversation toward the limited opportunities still available to black actresses. She did it with such grace, the writer said, that there was no awkwardness at all. Johnny immediately followed her lead. Most guests would never have attempted to steer Carson that way, and if they had, it might have created tension. When Carol did it, it felt natural, necessary even. That ability to bring substance without sacrificing poise deeply impressed Carson. In private conversations, he often expressed admiration for how she navigated her dual identity, glamorous star and cultural trailblazer. After one appearance, Johnny reportedly told his producer, "She never makes you choose between taking her seriously and enjoying her company." For Carson, that was high praise. An acknowledgement that Carol had mastered something few guests ever did, being intellectually meaningful and personally delightful at the same time. Many could manage one, rarely both. Even her fashion choices became legendary among the staff. Carol cultivated a timeless elegance that felt intentional rather than trendy, a visual extension of the composure she brought to every appearance. Carson, who valued authenticity and presence above all else, appreciated that consistency. With Diane Carroll, beauty was never the headline. It was the frame, surrounding a woman of intelligence, purpose, and quiet authority who left a lasting impression long after the cameras stopped rolling. When Ursula Andress made her first appearance on The Tonight Show in the 1960s, shortly after her breakout role in Dr. No, she arrived with a kind of cultural weight few actresses could claim. She wasn't just another beautiful guest. She was already a cinematic myth. As the first Bond girl, Andress had created one of the most indelible images in film history. Emerging from the Caribbean Sea in a white bikini, knife at her hip, rewriting the rules of glamour in action cinema. That single moment didn't just define her career, it set a template that filmmakers are still chasing decades later. "You could feel it the second she walked out," recalled an NBC executive who was present for her first appearance. There was something almost mythological about her beauty, this perfect balance of European sophistication and something far more primal. When Andress stepped onto Carson's stage, the audience didn't simply applaud. There was a collective intake of breath, less appreciation than awe. Unlike American actresses who often projected warmth and approachability, Andress brought a distinctly European sensibility to her appearances. Direct, unapologetically sensual, and refreshingly honest. Where many American beauties deflected compliments with self-deprecating humor, Andress accepted admiration with an easy confidence. She didn't apologize for her effect. Carson found that surprising and quietly exhilarating. Her impact was immediate. Johnny actually lost his place during the introduction, remembered a cameraman who worked one of her early appearances. He was listing the night's guests, got to her name, glanced at the monitor showing her in the green room, and just stopped, completely blanked. For Carson, the most prepared and disciplined host in television, that moment of genuine fluster was almost unheard of. He recovered quickly, but the lapse said everything about her presence. What made Andress especially compelling as a Tonight Show guest was the contrast between her goddess-like appearance and her grounded, unpretentious conversational style. Unlike many actresses who arrived carefully rehearsed, she spoke with a European frankness about her career and personal life that Carson found both challenging and invigorating. "He wasn't hosting, he was hypnotized," joked a writer who prepared questions for her segments. Ursula didn't perform beauty, she simply embodied it. There was no calculation. That natural authority, paired with her Swiss-German directness, led to exchanges that felt startlingly real. She answered questions plainly, sometimes bluntly, in a way that caught Carson off guard and delighted the audience. The interviews felt less like television and more like overhearing an intimate, fascinating conversation. Behind the scenes, Andress's appearances created a different kind of energy among the Tonight Show staff. Not excitement, not chaos, something closer to reverence. With Ursula, there was this quiet recognition, one crew member recalled. We weren't just hosting a movie star, we were in the presence of someone who had created a genuine cultural landmark. And everyone, from the audience to the host himself, felt it. The crew treated her with a rare combination of professional respect and barely concealed awe. There was almost none of the usual backstage joking, remembered a production assistant who worked during her segments. When Ursula was booked, everyone was on their absolute best behavior. It felt less like preparing for a guest and more like welcoming visiting royalty. It wasn't only her beauty, though that was undeniable. It was her status. Ursula Andress wasn't just famous. She had created a moment that permanently altered cinema's visual language. Everyone in the building understood that distinction, and it shaped the way she was treated from the moment she arrived. That recognition carried through to Carson's interviews with her. While Johnny never ignored her extraordinary looks, he was equally intent on engaging with her as an artist whose work had left a lasting mark on film history. He spoke with her about how the now legendary beach scene had changed her life and how it reshaped the action genre itself. Johnny had a unique gift, noted someone who worked closely with him. He could acknowledge a woman's beauty without ever reducing her to it. With Andress, he struck that balance perfectly. He asked thoughtful questions about her career decisions, her experiences working with different directors, and her perspective on how the Bond films had evolved since her groundbreaking role. What impressed Carson most was Andress's complete lack of false modesty. Unlike many actresses who downplayed their significance or seemed uncomfortable discussing their status as sex symbols, she spoke plainly about her impact. There was one appearance where Johnny asked about the white bikini scene, and her response was refreshingly direct. She said something like, "Of course it changed everything," recalled a writer. "One does not create a moment like that and expect life to remain the same." There was no self-consciousness, no apology, just an honest acknowledgement of reality. Johnny later told his producer that he found that kind of honesty deeply appealing in an industry built on pretense. For Carson, who prided himself on distinguishing between authentic and performed personality, Andress represented something increasingly rare in Hollywood. Natural confidence without arrogance, beauty without apology, and directness without calculation. In private conversations, he often contrasted her approach with the carefully manufactured personas becoming more common among American celebrities. Johnny once remarked that Ursula didn't seem to need America's approval, revealed an executive. It was meant as high praise. She carried herself with a distinctly European self-assurance, one that didn't rely on constant validation or audience reaction. She knew exactly who she was. She knew her place in film history, and she wore that certainty effortlessly. As we conclude our exploration of Johnny Carson's most beautiful guests, we turn to a woman who, despite never appearing on his show, held a singular place in his private gallery of iconic beauties. A star whose absence became its own kind of presence.
Aren't you ashamed of those suspicions you had about me?
Terribly.
Cut it, good, thank you.
Marilyn Monroe, the beautiful ghost of The Tonight Show. Perhaps the most intriguing name on Johnny Carson's private list of the most beautiful women ever connected to his program was the one who never actually sat across from him. Marilyn Monroe died in 1962, just months before Carson became the permanent host, yet her presence lingered over the show for decades. Monroe's absence became a kind of quiet mythology. Johnny would occasionally refer to her as the ultimate guest who got away, someone whose shadow hovered over the desk even though she never occupied the chair. He mentioned her often, explained a longtime producer who worked with Carson through much of his 30-year run. It almost became a running theme. Over the years, whenever Carson interviewed a stunning actress or a rising sex symbol, Monroe would sometimes surface as the unspoken comparison. She was the benchmark, the standard against which all Hollywood glamour was measured. There was a sense that she embodied something essential about American beauty and celebrity, something later stars could approach, but never fully replicate. Carson's fascination wasn't merely professional admiration for a cultural icon. It was tinged with regret. In private conversations, he occasionally speculated about how a Marilyn Monroe interview might have unfolded if timing had allowed their careers to intersect. He once called her the most beautiful woman who never sat in that chair, recalled someone who knew him well. Johnny believed there was far more to Monroe than the carefully manufactured sex goddess persona. Beneath it, he suspected, lived a wounded, intelligent, deeply sensitive woman with serious artistic ambitions. That tension between public image and private reality was exactly the kind of complexity Carson loved to explore. He thought she would have been a mesmerizing interview, not despite her contradictions, but because of them. What makes Carson's fixation on Monroe especially revealing is how it evolved over time. In the 1960s and early 70s, his references tended to frame her primarily as the ultimate sex symbol. But by the 1980s and 90s, as public understanding of Monroe's struggles deepened, Carson's remarks reflected a far more nuanced view. She haunted the stage without ever stepping onto it, observed a writer who worked with Carson in his later years. By the time I joined the show, Johnny wasn't just talking about Marilyn as the blonde bombshell. He talked about how the industry built her up and then failed her. In that way, Monroe became more than a missed booking. She became a symbol, a reminder of the cost of fame, the fragility behind glamour, and the kind of interview Carson wished he'd had the chance to conduct. One that never happened, but somehow remained present all the same. As Carson himself aged and gained distance from the machinery of fame, his understanding of Marilyn Monroe grew noticeably more empathetic. With perspective came clarity. He began to see not just the image the world had consumed, but the cost of sustaining it. That shift mirrored the broader cultural reassessment of Monroe, from sex symbol to tragic figure to feminist icon, and it revealed Carson's own intellectual honesty as a broadcaster willing to revise his views. Unlike many of his contemporaries who clung to their first impressions of cultural figures, Carson showed a rare openness to new interpretations. He absorbed new information, reconsidered old assumptions, and allowed his understanding of Monroe's legacy to evolve. One moment in particular stood out. Johnny once spoke with a film historian who appeared on the show, recalled a longtime producer. During a commercial break, the conversation turned to Monroe. The historian mentioned recently published research about her intellectual curiosity, her poetry, her serious dramatic training under Lee Strasberg, her deep interest in literature, and the personal library she kept filled with classic works. Johnny was genuinely riveted. Later, he turned to his producer and said quietly, "We all missed who she really was. We saw what we wanted to see." It was a strikingly reflective admission from someone who had spent a lifetime at the center of entertainment culture. This growing appreciation for Monroe's complexity began to surface on air. When Carson interviewed actresses who portrayed her, or women constantly compared to her, he shifted the focus. Rather than lingering on physical resemblance or sex appeal, he asked deeper questions. How did they understand Monroe's vulnerability, her intelligence, the psychological pressure of being frozen in the public imagination as a symbol of beauty? There was one interview, remembered a writer, where an actress had just played Monroe in a television film. Instead of asking about recreating the breathy voice or iconic hairstyles, Johnny asked how she approached Monroe's inner life, her loneliness, her ambition, her fragility. It surprised the audience, but it revealed how much Carson's own understanding had matured. To Johnny, Monroe ultimately represented the perfect intersection of extraordinary beauty and profound psychological depth, the ideal talk show guest. Someone visually captivating, yes, but also rich with inner contradiction and emotional truth. That she never appeared on his show remained in his mind one of the great missed opportunities of his career. In his final years, Carson would occasionally indulge in quiet what-if conversations with his producers. If there was one guest he wished he could have interviewed, the answer never changed. Marilyn Monroe always topped the list. He believed she would have been more than stunning. She would have been fascinating. A woman who lived at the very center of American celebrity culture and paid a devastating personal price for it. For an interviewer who always searched for the person behind the persona, Monroe represented the ultimate challenge, a public image so powerful it nearly erased the private self beneath it.